Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's Shriners Children's Open. And joining me to break it all down, Nejad is here. Sia, what up?
I cannot wait to break this down with Las Vegas, Rick. This is a big moment for me.
I cannot wait. The time has come. Leg one of the Vegas swing is here. Greg DuCharme joins us as well. Greg, on a scale from 1 to 10, how excited are you for this event?
Oh, I don't even kid you when I say this. I'm right near. I would say it's 8.5 stars. I'm way up there on this range on this, and there's a couple reasons why, and they're largely unrelated to golf. So and I'm sorry for a little early rant here, but in my life right now, I'm dealing with a lot of problems that are very aggravating. One of them, at my place of work, fortunately not at my place of living, I've been dealing with internet issues for 3 weeks, and it falls into my job description. So I am constantly, although everybody deals with it, constantly on the phone with our internet provider, constantly getting new equipment, update. Oh, it has been a literal nightmare making appointments. They're showing up at 8 o'clock at night for these, and it's the wrong guy, and nothing. It's been maddening, to say the least. Then, in my home, we now have new friends living with us, and they're mice. So I have, after the show tonight, one thing I'm really excited for is setting some mouse traps, and I can't. I bought a bunch of mouse traps today, and I got big work gloves so I can scoop them up. And they have all these options for no-see traps.
Some are pretty and some ain't so pretty. Or did you go for like the dirty ones? What do you want to see the pain and destruction?
I need to see it. I need to see it because I'm just so angry. And this is where I have to go animal, get to that. I got to reach that dark place. And so anyway, I have mouse hunting tonight. Internet issues will continue, no doubt, tomorrow. And the saving grace in my life, the shining light, the shining beacon, is my family, 1, and 2, fantasy sports. So fortunately, I'm winning in fantasy golf, winning in fantasy football, and that's it's the glue that's keeping me all together right now.
It might be the glue that those mice run onto and then can't get off. That's another type of trap as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to taunt him. I'm going to get a taunting flag.
You are dealing with an internet service provider I would not wish on my worst enemy. That is just the absolute single worst thing.
Yeah.
TPC Summerlin. I'm going to share my screen here. This is my website, RickRunGood.com. TPC Summerlin, Sia. We've got this course. Historically, you got to go pretty low. In fact, last year's 7 under, that's not a mistake, 7 under par was the cut line, the lowest in PGA Tour history. See an early look at the forecast. Might be a little bit windy. That might help keep scoring down, but this is an event and a track that you can get after out there if you're a PGA Tour professional.
Absolutely. And it's one of the, it's one of those places, Rick, and you're from here. You can correct us if we're wrong, but it's one of these places where you don't find a lot of trouble. So, I mean, off the tee, the fairways are wide. If you don't hit the fairway, you probably won't be in much trouble as it is. That doesn't mean hitting the fairway is completely unimportant. I'd prefer guys who are going to hit it straight off the tee, obviously. I think you're going to have to just rein it in with the approach game, specifically wedge up to, 75 to 150 yards. I think that's sort of like the wheelhouse in terms of where a majority of your shots are probably going to come. And if you're precise there and you can get it onto these big greens close to the cup, I think you're going to be in really good shape.
Keep it out of the desert, Greg. If you keep it out of the desert, you got a chance. And it is not long by tour standards. They're very large greens. In fact, the 4th largest greens that we've had on the PGA Tour in the last year. If you keep it out of the desert, you should have plenty of scoring opportunities.
I find it interesting, and I think this is highlighted here. If you look at your highest correlated stats, a lot of them are making their birdie statistics, right? Consecutive birdie streak I see there.
Putting, a lot of putting ones.
A lot of putting, right? You got to go out there and you got to score and you got to make it happen. And the separator is not in in ball striking. Although you could argue it's still important. I'm still going to feature some iron players. I think some of those statistics in there are close putting metrics, like 4 to 8 feet, 6 feet, 10 inside of 10 feet. So if you can give yourself those kind of birdie opportunities, like Sam Burns did on Sunday, he had 7 birdie putts inside of 6 feet. And if you can get your way around the golf course in that fashion, and you can avoid the desert and avoid mistakes, then you can chip away at the leaderboard and really make some birdies, because you have to do it every day. So how are you going to shoot really low scores every day? You can't lean on, you can't lean simply on making 25 footers the whole time. So you have to handle par fives. You have to handle shorter par fours. You can't make bogeys, and you got to hole a lot of putts. So I think it's really cool, the Las Vegas swing in general, because it's kind of like when we get into the desert, it reminds me a lot of what I call dome golf, where the elements are much more similar day to day. There may be a change from morning to afternoon in temperature, but there's usually low wind, and scoring conditions are perfect for day to day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it got a pretty decent field this week here, Sia. I mean, Brooks Koepka here, Sam Burns here, Victor Hovland making an appearance, Abraham Ancer, Webb Simpson. And what we generally see is a lot of these guys, if they play it every single year. You're going to see that with obviously Kevin Na, who's a resident, but Webb Simpson and some of these guys, they just seem to either start their season here or try to get here. So there's a lot of really good year over year data, not only for this course, but for the way this field plays at this course.
Yeah, and obviously that's going to factor in. I mean, course history is definitely going to play a big part here. I don't think it's imperative, which is why, for example, Victor Hovland is a guy I'm going to be playing in DFS, and he has obviously no course history here. But yeah, those are great indicators. It's definitely one of the major things I'm looking for outside of recent form, of course, and just the strokes gain metrics that we want to focus on.
Well, let's jump into it, because you already mentioned Victor Hovland. He falls into that $10,000 range. The rest of that range, Sia: Brooks Koepka, most expensive, $11,100. Sam Burns, $10,900. Victor Hovland, we talked about, $10,006. Ancer is $10,400. Webb Simpson is $10,200, and Will Zalatoris finishes us off here, Sia, at $10,100. You mentioned Hovland. We can talk about him, but who else in this range is garnering your attention?
Yeah, Hovland's number one for me. I think from a cash game standpoint, I might like Abraham Ancer. I have a feeling he's going to be somewhat popular in this range, though, so I'm not sure how much I want to play him from a tournament standpoint, and that's just because of his history here. I don't think I want to play much Webb. I'm just not loving the play in 2020, and I'm just not there yet with him. Brooks Koepka, I'm definitely out on. So for me, it's probably going to be Victor Hovland and our champion from last week, which was Sam Burns.
Yeah, so going back to Sam Burns is kind of interesting. We talk about that all the time, about guys kind of being penalized for being the best. But you remember after his win last year, I think he finished runner-up at his next start. Like he's ready to get back after it. I'm a bit more bullish on Webb Simpson than probably Sia is, Greg. We don't have to talk about Webb specifically, but who out of these 10K guys should we be strongly getting into our lineups?
Well, I find a very interesting narrative with Webb. Among other things, I think Sia might take a little interest in. I know he loves the trip down Narrative Street. Mm-hmm. Sam Burns was a guy who got the phone call about not making the Ryder Cup team last week. He said it motivated him. It was something that really bothered him, and it drove him forward to success this week. Of course, there's other things like his raw talent that come into play, but that's definitely a factor. And I think there's a narrative with Webb Simpson this season where that is on the forefront of his mind, and he wants to be a guy in contention. 2021 with Webb for me was a strange year. He had a little bit of illness. He had a little bit of injury. He missed a couple of home games, missed a couple of events that he normally performs quite well in. And it hurt his chances towards the end of the year. And he never was able to get in a rhythm where he could play multiple weeks in a row. This week for Webb, I really like him, because I think I can kind of write off a little bit of what happened last year to some unique circumstances. And I look at what he's done here in the past, and in his last 4 starts, all top 20 finishes. There were 2 in 16 and 17. He was outside of that top 20 mark, although still made the cut. And the 3 finishes before that, 2010, 2014, 2015, was a tied 4th, a win, and another tied 4th. So there's a very consistent track for him. And then those metrics, the birdie metrics, the round 4 scoring metrics, all those things that Rick highlighted earlier as being important and highly correlated to success. Webb checks the box in. I mean, even last year in a weak year, his round 4 scoring, I believe, was second on the PGA Tour. And I'll look that up right now.
While you do
impressive.
What's so interesting about Webb Simpson is, okay, there's two things. For Summerlin course history, who are the guys we go to? Kevin Na, we go to Patrick Cantlay. When we think about Webb Simpson course history, we go to Harbortown, we go to Phoenix. We never really talk about this. This is unbelievable stuff from Webb Simpson, and I was showing it on the screen as Greg was describing it. But in, I think, quick count, 10 trips, he's got 7 top 25s, including the victory. I mean, he's just always near the top of the leaderboard. It just never gets talked about, which I find to be interesting.
Pulling up this scoring. Oh shoot, I'm on the wrong year. Okay, I'm still a second away because that's 2022. But okay, round 4 scoring. Yeah, it's really good. He is second last year. I was right. So second in round 4 scoring, second in actual scoring average, 10th in total scoring average, which is adjusted, and 8th in birdie average. And that's in a down year.
That was like his worst year in like the last decade.
Right. Like, what's wrong with Webb? And he scores. He knows how to do it. He knows how to get the job done. So I like him on a golf course where you got to make a ton of birdies.
It's fascinating. We'll see. Who else? Okay, so Sia, how much Ryder Cup are we playing into this? That would speak to Brooks. It would speak to Victor Hovland. I kind of saw different things from each of these guys. Are we considering that? Are we throwing it out? What's our plan here for some of the Ryder Cup guys? And especially as we go deeper down the board, we're going to find more of them.
No, I'm not really considering it, to be honest with you. I just think that's such a different format. It's such a different event. It just doesn't factor in for me. I mean, when I look at Hovland, I'm looking at recent form, which is good. I'm just looking at the fact that in this field, I think he might be the best ball striker. I mean, obviously you can make arguments, but I'm just saying at the top, I'm not sure he's not the best person in this field. I'm including Brooks and Webb in that conversation. So I'm just trying to take advantage to capitalize on the upside. I mean, his ball striking, look, we're trying to get guys who can get really hot on approach and stick it right next to the cup. And, his approach numbers can pop in such a way that he can absolutely destroy a course on any given day. So that's sort of what I'm looking at for Victor Hovland.
Yeah, I love Victor Hovland. Let's get Abraham Answer into the conversation here, Greg. Abraham Answer at 10,400 or Will Zalatoris at 10,100. Which would you prefer?
I'd lean on the putter more in this case. Answer. Answer. They're both really good ball strikers. Answer's a great ball striker in his own right, but he also does really well in the desert. And you see him pop from time to time. He doesn't have the consistency of a Webb Simpson in terms of course history, but he has 2 fourth place finishes. One was a T4, and one was a solo fourth. And then I also think to what he's done at the American Express out in the desert, where he's got a second place finish, a couple of other really nice finishes. And I think that's a really interesting angle for Abraham Answer. So I would take Abraham over Zalatoris in this case.
I think so would I. I'm actually pretty bullish on Answer this week. You mentioned the history. If you give me a course where you play out of the fairway, you're going to have a lot of looks and you don't have to overpower this with distance. Great. And then you get a guy who his by far best putting surface is bent grass. All of those signs point to Abraham Answer. Sia, would you agree with that sentiment? Answer over Zalatoris, or would you prefer the other side of it?
No, I prefer the other. I prefer Answer, actually. I mean, we do have to point out, you might have already said this, but Zalatoris was 5th here last year. But in terms of just grading out, I like Answer quite a bit better.
Yeah. How long, and we do this with a lot of guys, Sia, how long until Will Zalatoris still hasn't won and it starts to become a problem, right? Because everyone understands he's very good. We did it with Answer, right? For a long time. It's like, oh, well, he can't win, all that stuff. How much leash does Zalatoris have here?
I think he's got at least a year. And there's so much talent right now that's just young talent pouring in and talent that's poured in over the last few years. It's really hard to win a golf tournament. And no matter how good Will Zalatoris is, circumstantially, you could have, one great day, but somebody has a better round 4. And it's just one of those things. I think if we're talking about him next year at this time and he doesn't have a win, then I think maybe he's going to start pressing a little bit, but I think he has time.
I think that's an interesting question because it depends on the angle. Is it when should we start to get concerned or when will we start to get concerned? And of course, we're asking when will we? So when will we? That depends in a strange way on the way that he plays and doesn't win. If he doesn't win,
weird?
Again, it's a hypothetical, right?
It's weird. It's because it's like Tony Finau. If Tony Finau just finished 21st every week, we would have never talked about him not winning. But because he got close, it's almost a gift and a curse.
Right. You end up in the second to last group again and you haven't won again. And oh my goodness, there is a Tony Finau problem here. Right. Which is at the numbers that Tony Finau put up, the amount of times he did it was a cause for concern without question. Because the numbers were just so much greater than anybody else near that category. You would think it was beyond the numbers. It was beyond the odds. Will Zalatoris has plenty of time to stay within the odds of getting a win. And if he does what he's been doing, these T11, T15 finishes repeatedly, it may draw some attention because it's steady and consistent play, but he'll draw criticism for not winning too early if he finishes second more often. If he's in the final group and it doesn't go very well, that's when you'll start to see the murmurs.
Let's move on down to the $9,000 range here. It's interesting. It's small, Sia. I'm not exactly sure what to do with it. We're going to have to parse this out together. Louis Oosthuizen is 9,900. Scotty Scheffler is 9,700. Hideki Matsuyama, 95. Harris English at 93. Sung Jae Im is 92. And at 9,100, the man who's won this event twice, Kevin Na. And then we round out this $9,000 range with Si Woo Kim. It's a lot to take in. I'm not super bullish. I guess I shouldn't say that. There's a couple of guys I'm interested in, but I'm not in love with the 9 Sia.
This might be a first. I'm really not liking the 9K range at all. It's funny about Kevin Na, by the way, because he's just one of those guys. And I don't know exactly. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but like nobody really wants to play Kevin Na. Maybe it's because of the injury history he has. Maybe it's just because he doesn't look the part like a Brooks Koepka does or a Bryson. I don't know what it is, but honestly, in this range, he's one of my favorite guys. I mean, it's not just that his history here is pretty great, although he's got some obviously miscuts in here too. But his recent form is, he missed the cut at the Fortinet, but prior to that, he was excellent for 4 to 5 tournaments in a row. Really excellent. We're talking 3 top 10s out of the 4 tournaments prior to the Fortinet. So he's definitely one of the guys I like that I'll probably play. I think Louis is interesting. Obviously, he's a birdie maker and this course should fit him just fine. Interestingly, from the proximities that we're concerned with, or I should say that I'm concerned with, Rick, because I know you're not a huge fan of the quote, the buckets, the range buckets or whatever. Last 24 rounds, Louis been, pretty below average in all of those ranges, which I just think is an interesting thing to point out. But really, it's just Louis and Kevin Na. I might sprinkle in some Si Woo Kim. He doesn't grade out great, but his history here is pretty great. The last 2 of the last 3 years, two top 15s. But I'm kind of reaching when I go to Si Woo. It's really Kevin and Louis that I like the most.
The Kevin Na stuff's pretty interesting because he's top 10 last 24 rounds strokes gained total. He's top 10 in this field. He's obviously got the couple of victories. His history here with the wins, and I think he had another runner-up finish. It's been kind of volatile, right? He's got that end of the spectrum. He's also got some miscuts and some uglier stuff. But obviously a Las Vegas resident and very, very comfortable here. And then Louis is kind of that steady Eddie for me, right? He's not really going to get you in trouble off the tee until he gets to a playoff at Zurich or something like that. Or maybe coming down the stretch at Torrey. He's going to give you one bad swing on a Sunday, but otherwise he's going to roll in enough putts and he's going to score. So Greg, when you start to assess this $9,000 range and you start to process it, what comes out of it?
With a couple things, a theory on Kevin Na. I think his course history here highlights the reason why we don't like to play him. And I'm one of those. I'm not a huge Kevin Na guy. Why we don't like to play him in DFS. And if you just read through it, starting from last year going backwards, T43, first, cut, tied second, WD, cut, tied 22nd, 1st, tied 45th, tied 15th. Right, there's volatility. You use the perfect word there, Rick, and we don't feel the same way, although their games, maybe you could argue they're similar styles. Webb Simpson and Kevin Na. Maybe Webb is a little bit better than Kevin Na in a lot of areas, especially like iron play and ball striking, but similar. They're not very long. They're not the most accurate players. And yet they make a lot of birdies and they find a way to win. But Webb is much more consistent. His floor is a lot higher. And this week we see that reflected in the price. But Kevin Na has a miscut floor. No question about it. I mean, he could be a complete dud for you, and yet he could be your hero as well. And it leaves people a little bit uncomfortable, in my opinion. It leaves me a little bit uncomfortable. But I do think there's a couple of lineups where he fits. I think it's worth the risk because he's been playing so well. And seeing what we've seen before the Fortinet, that run of 4 or 5 tournaments in a row, it's an anomaly. It's not the usual, but if it becomes the usual, this would be a great place to kind of start that run again. And I feel his confidence is really high. I feel his Ryder Cup, missing the Ryder Cup, making the next Ryder Cup or President's Cup team, that narrative, the drive for him is very high, I'm sure. So I think it could be a fair spot for Kevin Na. And I also like Louis. I mean, Louis, I like it because of what he can do on the greens, but I'm almost lukewarm on Louis because let's be honest, it's not a major.
I don't know if it's this week or next week or ever happens, but I'm very, very interested to watch the next year or so from Scotty Scheffler. And I think that we saw this at the President's Cup with Sung J M. We saw at the President's Cup with Abraham Ancer. It was a little bit of a coming out party for those guys, even Cam Smith to an extent, a little bit of a coming out party. And I wonder if Scheffler, now having that Ryder Cup taste, having some big matches, one against John Rahm, he's involved with Bryson. I mean, I'm just excited to see what comes out of him in the next 12 months.
And I think you could see some brilliance out of him. And his record here isn't great. He's played here twice, and he doesn't have a notable finish on his record. But I do think he could handle a place like this. I think he gained a lot of confidence with a couple of key putts at the Ryder Cup. We know the driving is his strength. The iron play is not terrible. But what he did with the putter at Whistling Straits could be the big confidence boost he needs.
You mentioned notable finish. I love that term. What do you normally use that for? Because I would have just said he missed the cut and finished 74th, and that I hate describing it like that. I'm trying to be like, oh, he hasn't cracked the top 60. So give me a scenario in which you could continue to use notable finishes, or like,
well, I'll tell you,
if he had a 30th, could I have said he had a notable finish?
So I use the notable finish in a sense where I'm looking through a lot of names, I'm looking through records, and I don't always remember exactly what that record is. But I take note, okay, Kevin Na has some volatility, but some really good ones. And if I have time to look it up, then I'll tell you what they are exactly. Mm-hmm. If I don't have time to look it up, well, now I can say, okay, I know Scotty Scheffler missed a cut, and I know the other one was not anything that drew my attention. I said to myself, not very good. So it's not notable. But on the tied 30th finish, is that a notable finish by itself? No. If it's mixed in with, if it's 4 straight top 30 finishes, if it's a tied 25th, tied 30th, if it's, in 5 of those in a row, well, then that could be notable. But the only things that are notable to me when they're one-offs and, you miss 5 cuts and the one event is a top 5, maybe a top 10, that becomes notable. But usually it has to be paired with something else.
I like that. I'm going to start working that into my vocabulary a little bit. I'm always looking for something like that. See a last word here on the 9K range, because I think at the end you mentioned Sung J M, and I did just want to point out he's played here twice. Both of them are notable finishes, top 15s, and he's been playing well enough coming in. Got off to a hot start at the Sanderson, kind of faded a little bit over the last couple of days. Any concerns out of that, or does this feel like amongst his peers, this might be a decent spot to get back in on Mr. Sung J M?
Well, it was actually Siwoo Kim. So
Oh,
I'm
I'm
not
sorry.
going to, yeah, that's okay. I'm not going to be on Sungjae, but speaking of sort of notable recent results and good results coming in from this tournament, Siwoo Kim's been pretty good. 8th and 11th over his last two, and he was 8th here in 2021, 15th in 2019. He made the cut in 2020, but finished 55th. Seems like a pretty good course fit for him. So I think at 9,000, it's probably an unpopular guy. I'm guessing it will be an unpopular guy. So it might be a good way to maybe gain leverage off some of the guys that are right near him in this 9-ish upper 8K range.
I never get him right. So I'll just tweet out whether I've played Siwoo Kim or not, and everyone else just do the opposite, because that would be the way to deploy Siwoo Kim at the moment.
But is Sungjae playable, Rick? Because
I think so. I was trying to build the case for a Sungjae.
I like him too. For the record, I only kind of corrected it because I didn't mention him. But now that you mention it, I mean, I think Sungjae is also a good play.
There are, and this is a little inside knowledge, there are Sungjae Im golf balls hanging around Summerlin at some point. Maybe he'll find one. I lost them there a couple of months ago. Plenty of them. Maybe he'll stumble across one, bring him a little extra good luck. So,
yeah. And Sungjae got a lot of notoriety last year about his total birdies, the record that he set.
Yeah.
But even with all the caveats that go with that, he was still 30th in birdie average. So he makes a lot of birdies, not just because he plays a lot. He actually does make a lot of birdies round to round to round. And I think he had a much better putting year last year. I think I saw some improvement in that, or I saw some viability in that anyway, because he was 50th in putting last year. So I look for Sungjae to have a solid week.
We got to get down to the 8K range. We have to talk about value in this field. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
Here we go.
And we're back. The $8,000 range starts with Paul Casey, Corey Connors, Jason Kokrak, and Patrick Reed. Goes all the way down to, let's say, Matthew Wolf, Charlie Hoffman, Eric Van Rooyen, and Greg. Again, another small $8,000 range. We've started to see this trend where it's like small 9K range, small 8K range, open it up in the 7s and the 6s. We've seen that this year on DraftKings. So only a few names. Find me some guys that we can put into our rosters. We've got you on mute, Greg. Or you have you on mute.
Sorry, I must have accidentally clicked it. I remember my first podcast. So anyway, I like what I saw from Corey Connors last week. And I like what I saw from him at the end of last year. Aside from the Tour Championship, he was 8th at the Northern Trust, 22nd at the BMW. I think this is a player who is an elite ball striker and has been for a while. But the birdies are starting to come from some improvement on the greens and in putting. And so I think that could go a long way in a week like this. So Corey Connors jumps out to me largely because we saw him somewhat in the mix last week. So he is interesting to me. Jason Kokrak is also kind of interesting to me. He is a Las Vegas guy, all in Jason Kokrak, right? And he made a huge stride last year in the putting as well. So I think there's an avenue for him to play really well. There have been some events with Kokrak where he's been a little bit of a letdown, where everybody was really kind of high on him and it was expected to play really well. And this may be one of those events because his record here is unflattering. And this is one of those cases where I'd say in 9 events, no notable finishes, right? A tied 20th is his best.
Yeah.
I'm
actually not even sure. Me too. I'm actually not even sure he's a Vegas guy, but apparently he plays a lot out here because of his MGM ties. I don't even know where he lives, but I'm pretty sure he plays out here a ton. He won at Shadow Creek and he had played Shadow Creek a ton. And I agree with you. Like on paper, even and Greg, you got a lot of starts. So clearly he has experience at a course, but if it's just not going well, is that more of a detriment to have that experience? Like I wrestle with that.
No. And look, part of the situation here at this place is you have to go crazy low in order to play well. There's no way around it. So you have to play an aggressive style. At least you feel that way. And sometimes it can take a while to get things to go your way. I mean, last year he shot 68, and it's a miscut. And now he has shot some 75s and some 74s, and he's played some poor rounds. He hasn't had that round of 62 or anything like that. But I don't think he's been the quality putter since he's played here as he is now. And the improvement on the greens for me is what really jumps off the page. He was sixth last year on the PGA Tour in strokes gained putting. I mean, it's everything except his short game was awesome.
He literally, the week after Shriners last year is when he really started to go nuts. So he won at Shadow Creek. He gained 10 strokes putting, and we said, no, he's not going to be able to do that. Then he gained 5 at Sherwood, and then he turned into one of the best putters on the PGA Tour, like the very next week after this event last year.
So I think it could give him a chance. But do you think he's going to be popular? Because when he's popular, I'm usually out on him. So I'm hoping he's an under the radar guy.
No, I think, and Sia, you can speak to this probably better than all of us. I mean, I see Cameron Tringale with a couple of back-to-back top 25s who's cheaper. I see Joaquin Neiman lurking, who's always pretty popular. I see Corey Connors in a similar range. I can't imagine Kokrak is overly exciting people.
Yeah, even Charlie Hoffman could be pretty popular given his price and just how he shows up in models. I agree. I don't think Kokrak's going to be super popular at all. So I think he's a pretty good, another guy in the 8K range that I think is going to be just not popular at all is Patrick Reed. I think he's super interesting.
Speaking of all in, Patrick Reed's probably going to win this event, right?
Well, I mean, it would make sense, right? I mean, because it's golf, right? But at the same time, like he's not even in our consciousness right now, other than some of the stuff with the Ryder Cup and just some of the stuff he does off the golf course. I mean, he's just truly like a guy that people's eyes are just going to fly right over. He doesn't have much experience here. If memory serves, the last time he played here was like 6 or 7 years ago. And it was, a very average finish. So I think just from a tournament leverage standpoint, I think Patrick Reed makes a lot of sense. He hasn't been that good lately, but he also hasn't been terrible either. His numbers relative to this field are middling.
You also get a month off, right, to kind of figure stuff out. He is going to use whatever way you see it, he will use the Ryder Cup as a snub, and he will burn this place to the ground, right? You don't have to be overly long. You have to make a lot of putts. You have to kind of get hot. He's great on all surfaces. He's great on bent grass. And of the guys that we're talking about, this $88,000 range, nobody has the win equity that Patrick Reed does. I don't know if he pulls it off, but like at $8,600, that amount of win equity and the just mentality that he's going to have this week is terrifying.
That's the thing that he always does so well. He plays so well when there's something that he's upset about, or when the crowd is getting on him, or when there's a reason for him to be ticked off. And he is right. I mean, I don't know how he's feeling exactly. You don't know what his day was like sitting on the couch watching the Ryder Cup. I'm sure he wasn't on the couch. I'm sure he was out playing golf. I don't know where his, what he's thinking about that whole thing. But I promise you, if you're in his shoes, whatever you think about him is irrelevant. If you're sitting in that position, you're jealous, and it hurts, and it makes you upset, and it makes you angry. And this is a guy who's dealt with these kind of things his whole career, ever since we've known him, since at least his college career. Mm-hmm. And so he's dealt with them really well. And so I look for a nice week out of Patrick Reed. I don't like leaning on narratives, but I think in this case, could be another one of those guys that comes out ready to set it on fire, as you said, Rick.
I'm going to try to get out there on Tuesday, and I'll ask him like 9 questions about the Ryder Cup and see if I can just like get him all riled up. See what happens. Yeah, right. Just
see the color of his eyes change.
Yeah, see what happens. The rest of this 8K range, Sia, I'm not sold on Paul Casey. I did not particularly like what I saw at the Ryder Cup. Again, You told me not to use that information. I did not like what I saw at all from Paul Casey, who played 4 matches, did not get a single point. And I'm also worried about, you mentioned him, Charlie Hoffman always shows up in these models, but his history here is pretty objectively horrible. So I don't know how much we want to lean on either one of those things, but I just don't really like this range either. I've got a lot of concerns.
Yeah, I totally get it. I agree with you on Charlie Hoffman. I actually probably won't be playing him. I just think
Here's
in
the
that
Hoffman
price.
history.
Yeah. Definitely check us out on YouTube. There's a lot of red there. Holy cow.
Yeah, missed the cut in 4 of his last 6, 74th and 18th in the other 2. He has a couple of top 6 finishes, but one was 8 years ago and the other was 12 years ago. He's been coming to this event for a while, but it hasn't been much good stuff recently.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm going to agree with Greg. I do like Corey Connors. I think you could probably put him where Harris English is at 9,300. I don't think anybody would have blinked at that. So I definitely think you're getting a discount with him. Neiman is one of those guys I never play correctly, just like you were saying about whoever I just brought up, like 10 or yeah, about Siwoo. So I don't know what to do with Neiman. If I play him, he's going to do horribly and vice versa. A couple of guys, the only other guy I think is interesting here and that I think might get lost in the ownership shuffle because there's guys right below him that are going to be pretty popular and right above him that are probably going to be popular. And that's EVR. I just, and I don't think he has any experience here, but we know how hot and how torrid his pace was trying to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs. And if you go by just sort of the, if we're going down narrative street again, I guess you could say, oh, well, he doesn't have that pressure now. And so he's probably not going to live up to his potential like he did, a month or two ago. But I just think he's a pretty good deal here at 8,000. And I think he has tremendous upside. We saw him get an outright win just a couple of months ago. And again, if he gets lost in the ownership shuffle, I think it's a really smart GPP play.
You know what, Sia? I agree. And I wonder with these narratives sometimes if it's a player blossoming, right? Does the pressure teach you that you can do it on the PGA Tour, that you can compete? Because he was a really good player, and you'd see him come and pop up in WGCs, and he wasn't a regular PGA Tour player, and he would do great. And then he came over here, and it was like just air out of the balloon. And I wonder if the end of last season has inspired him and taught him that he can do it. And I don't think it's a momentum play, but has he just found the recipe? And across the board last year, he was a gainer in strokes gain in every category. I mean, not elite, but he's between 58th and 98th in everything. And I think that could go, it could go a long way, having a well-rounded base. Maybe you'll start to see some areas start to improve a little bit more for him this year.
Let's jump on down to the $7,000 range. This is where things really open up. I'm not going to read through all of these names, but I'll read through a couple of notable. $7,800, Mito Pereira. Danny Willett, fresh off his victory at the Alfred Dunhill. He's at $7,700. Ryan Palmer, $7,500. And then we go down to a very popular name at $7,300, one Ricky Fowler.
Yeah, I mean,
Ricky Fowler.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know I was waiting for that.
We are struggling. That's the second drop I tried to hit us with. The other one was what was the other one? Oh,
Kevin Nam.
There it is. Yeah. Sia, when you look at this $7,000 range, and there's a lot of names to go through, who are some notables?
So many names I like, which I'm sure isn't a shock to people, but Russell Henley's one of them. Again, I'm looking for guys that are pretty accurate and that on approach are potentially going to stick it next to the pin. And I think Russell Henley's one of those guys. Now, his track record here isn't amazing by any stretch. Recent history isn't amazing either, but I just like the ball striking. And I think he's a guy I'm definitely going to be playing at 7,900. Streelman's a guy who he has no good history here whatsoever. And his recent form is also bad. And
fire him up.
Well, that's the thing. But that's the thing, right? Because he seems like a pretty good course fit. You certainly don't need to be long here with how firm this course is going to be and the altitude and whatnot. I don't understand why these finishes are what they are. And it would be so golf. It would be so DFS if, after day 3, he's like in 7th place. And we're all like, oh, of course, Kevin Streelman is in 7th place. I just think he's a good fit here. And so I'm not always going to ignore the course history and recent form. But in this particular case, I think I want to play him.
to your larger point about him, he should be a good fit. He did have a 5-year stretch where he went 14th, 16th, 22nd, runner up, 16th. That is what you would expect from good kind of course history Kevin Streelman. It's the last 5 that he went 61st, 67th, 51st, and 2 missed cuts. So it's not, over 10 years, it's much better than it is over 5, which is at least worth noting.
So at least he has some good experience here,
Yes.
so he can draw back on something. Mito Pereira, of course, he's going to be a guy that a lot of people are going to like. It's a good price on him. Matt McNeely and Birdie Fests, I'm always all about him. And last time I played him, I'm trying to remember what tournament it was. It was the Fortinet, where I was big on him because I thought that was going to be another Birdie Fest. He finished second place. Brian Harmon's another guy. He's sort of been lost in the shuffle, a guy that people aren't really thinking of. But we know he can get hot. He's certainly going to be a fine course fit here. He's going to find fairways. And listen, I just think Brian Harmon at 7,600. I mean, he has good history here. Is a guy that you're definitely getting value from. And I'll just go over a couple more I like.
Real quick before you do that, because
yeah.
I think this Brian Harmon is an interesting case study, and I want to bring Greg in on this because there's also other guys. Stuart Sink, I would lump into this category as well. There were guys that just faded down the stretch last year, and they had overall really good seasons, and their last 4 or 5 starts, whether it was the end of a super season, whether it was whatever, the results weren't that good. Now, how do we kind of reconcile their first start out this year with what we saw at the end of last year? Do we assume that having a month off, 5 weeks off, 6 weeks off is going to allow them to get back into the longer term form, or should we be concerned about these guys?
Well, I think Stuart Sink had a little bit of a struggle, and there's the unfortunate question: was this his last hurrah for Stuart Sink, who I'm a huge fan of, and I love the things he's doing? That's a question you have to ask, and I hope that's not the case. As for Brian Harmon is concerned, he was on a torrid pace in May and June. Right, he had 3 straight really good weeks, and a couple more. And before that, even it was really that's where he was really shining around the Players in March. So it was a good stretch for a couple months there for him. Towards the end, when it starts to get quote unquote bad, you're looking at a T19 at the Open, which is not a bad. That's not a bad finish.
No, that's a great result for a place that did not fit him.
Right. And then you go to Memphis, and he has a tied 36. He shoots 70, a pair of 69s, and another 70 on Sunday. Misses the cut at the Wyndham, 69, 70. The Northern Trust looks bad, 72, 66, 76, 73. So you don't like to see that high score. But as I've looked through the scores from Liberty National, there were a lot of good players who shot some pretty high scores, at least for a round at that golf course. So if you give him a pass on that, I'll leave it up to you. He hasn't really shot any rounds outside of the Northern Trust above 71 since the U.S. Open. So I don't think there's a problem with Brian Harmon. It's just, is Brian Harmon going to catch enough fire to go low at a venue like this? When you go to a place where you could shoot 68 and miss the cut, I don't love Brian Harmon in an event like that.
Literally, Greg's not joking. There were guys that shot 68 last year and missed the cut. That's actually kind of crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So sorry, I didn't want to jump in as you continue to throw your names out there, but I did think that conversation was worth having.
Oh, for sure. Just a few other names. I was impressed with what I saw from Sahith Theegala last week. I talked about him briefly on the show last week, and he kind of put it together for 4 rounds. And again, I think he might have had an injury issue towards the middle to end of 2021, or maybe even the beginning too, that he has gotten over. So I think we still might be a little early. I don't think anybody's really going to play him because that price is pretty high. I'm actually surprised at his price myself. I think he probably, I would have expected him, in spite of the great finish last week, to be more in like the 7,100, 7,200 range. But here he is. Seamus Powers, another guy I like. And I'll finish it off with Shez Reavie and Henrik Norlander. Norlander's been playing great, and I think Reavie's a pretty good course fit here.
Let's do the Norlander thing real quick, because I need to do Norlander and I need to do one other guy. So Norlander last week gained over 8 strokes on approach, which is honestly, not that uncharacteristic. I want to say he gained 7.6 at the Barbasol. What I love about those two results, one, he's capable of doing it, but he also gained strokes putting in both weeks when he was lighting it up on approach. Those are good ceiling metrics. That builds out a profile of a golfer who can actually tap into a ceiling. He's horrible on bent grass, so I'm not without concerns, but I wouldn't mind going there. And I'll do the Ricky Fowler thing. Listen, I talk all the time. Are we going to be early or are we going to be late? I think it's very easy. You give Ricky a chance. You give yourself a chance to be early on Ricky this week. And if he's garbage, then you go back to being late on him. But he's now had 2 months to try to figure something out. And we saw a couple of glimpses of hope down at the end of last season. And also, here's a fun little fact. If you remove it doesn't even have to be for players in this field. If you just look at TPC Summerlin and you look at the best putters over the years at TPC Summerlin, who's number one with at least 5 rounds played? It's Ricky Fowler. 14 rounds. He's gained 1.6 strokes. You go to a place, you start rolling the rock. The rest of the game starts to come a little bit easier, starts to feel himself again. I don't know. I'll try to be early on Ricky. We'll see.
Look, I totally understand that, Rick. And for a guy with last year, he missed the cut. Okay. He missed a lot of cuts in 2021. But his 4 previous starts were all top 25s, including a T4 in 2019, a T7 in 2009. This is a guy with top 15 world rank, top 15 player in the world, talent wise, potential wise, who's at 7,300. I am not comfortable. I was so let down with what happened last year and so disappointed with the way last year went that I'm not in love with it. But I think the smart money here is to take a chance to be early. It's the beginning of a year. You hope that he missed the playoffs and he's inspired and he's angry. He's not even close to a Ryder Cup conversation. And I'm sure he misses hanging out with the boys. And while they're all, having fun at the Ryder Cup, he's on his boat or who knows what, watching, who knows what he's doing, but I'm sure that he's not happy. And I think there's a real chance that he could be a contender this week if he figured something out.
Is he one of the most interesting stories this year? I mean, just kind of in general, right? I mean, we kind of, is this similar to Spieth from this time last year where we didn't know what we were going to get, or were we more hopeful for Spieth? I can't remember.
Yeah,
I was foaming at the mouth when he started to play well, but I don't remember how we actually felt about him.
Yeah, we're all watching, right? A Jordan Spieth and a Ricky Fowler, you're watching closely because you expect some success out of them. And for Ricky, we at least want to talk about how he can't win, how he can't close. We don't want to talk about how he can't play at all, or how he's missing. We don't want to talk about that. That's no fun. It's no fun piling on a guy like that. It's fun piling on a guy that finishes second and telling him that he's a choker and he's racking off top 10s.
Yeah,
so
that's what I want to do.
Right, and that's what we want for Ricky, or we want him to actually win and close the deal. The game's got a long way to go, but I think there is an avenue to be a smart DFSer here and be early on him for this week.
Is it bad that I looked up to see when his card expires? We're at that point with Ricky. He's got it through next year. So
yeah,
he's good. He's good for a while. Anybody else in the 7K range before we move on to the real value in this field? Our defending champion Martin Laird is here. Cameron Young played well last week. I'm auctioning guys off. Are there any
I'll throw a couple names at you.
Okay.
I haven't thrown names at you in this range yet. So one, I like Mito. I do like Mito for obvious reasons. He's been a horse. I think his floor is so high. So you ride Mito to the finish line into the sunset. I like Taylor Gooch. I think Taylor Gooch is another safe player who's played well here in the past. He's a well-rounded player with a really nice finish at the Fortinet. So I think you could see him, although there is a little more miscut risk with him. I could see him playing well and missing the cut, but I am kind of expecting some good things out of him. So I would throw that name into the ring. I would throw Cam Davis's name into the ring. One of those guys that's long and can putt and can win. And so I would definitely throw his name into the ring. And I think there was, aside from Ricky, I think I had one other name that jumped out at me. Reeve piques my interest, but I don't know about Shea Rivet. I've been on it for a while. I've been expecting it to turn, and it hasn't. His record here isn't great, so I'm going to leave him off my list.
Man, he just needs to like not stink around and on the greens.
Yeah, he's got to play really well to contend.
But he is a dart thrower. He is so good on approach, but like just make a putt. Don't I mean, it's easy for me to say from this side of the keyboard,
right?
But I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah.
Let's go down to the 6,000s. This is the true value. If you want to get access to maybe Brooks Koepka at the top, you might have to dabble in this range. At the top, Charles Howe III, Doug Gim, Francesco Molinari. How about this? Garrick Higo. He's a winner on the PGA Tour. Alonzo Griffin, Roger Sloan. They're all 6,900. And all the way down at this very bottom of the large range. Ooh, these are actually better names than I was anticipating. Tyler McCumber, Harry Hall, Brian Gay, Adam Long. Those are the notables from the min $6,000 price range. Sia, what do you got?
Speaking of Harry Hall, somebody sent me a tweet today, and it was how Harry Hall shot like 12 under just 5 days ago at TPC Summerlin. So, and he has Vegas ties as well. So I think Harry Hall actually posted it himself, and then somebody sent me the tweet. So just throwing that out there at 6K. There's a lot to like in this 6K range, guys. I mean, this is these birdie fests. We know they cater to some of these 6 and 7K guys sort of emerging sort of towards the top as the tournament goes forward. And it wouldn't shock me at all if some of these 6K guys are there, or at least somewhere close on Sunday. Garrick Higo is one of them. Another guy with Vegas ties, Rick, which I'm sure you know. We know he has some win equity. He's probably he sort of faded down the stretch last year, but I think Higo's a great play. Adam Schenk has pretty good history here, actually very good history here considering his price. Another guy, Chesson Hadley, who will not grade out well at all, also has really good history here. Interestingly, I can't quit Jim Herman. He's down here. I like him as well. Kyle Stanley, a guy who absolutely can't putt, but I think he's 6,100. Somebody might have to correct me there, but just with a guy that strikes it that well with the ball striking, I think I might want to take a chance on him. And then the last guy I'll mention is Hammer and Hank Lebioda at 6,300. I mean,
yes,
like what a fall from grace. Like, let's go ahead and take a shot now.
I know it is weird. Fall from grace for Hank Lebioda. I found that Harry Hall tweet. So this was more than 2 days ago. This was on the 28th of September. So that was last Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
He shot, tied his lowest round. It was a 60. It was out in 29, in 31, with lots of circles, as you can imagine. Not a single bogey, as you can imagine. A 60 on, he probably played it. It plays as a par 72 for every week that's not this week. So that's 12 under at TPC Summerlin. That's exciting.
So I like to call that lock button Harry Hall. That's what I like to call it.
Oh boy.
I'm just joking. I'm not giving that advice out.
I mean, he's the min price. He'd give you a lot of flexibility. That's kind of interesting. Greg, when you see this $6,000 range, how do you interpret it?
I love right up near the top here, Roger Sloan.
Yeah.
The end of his year last year was fascinating, and he got to that point where he had made it, and the run ended, and you could see it. It was so clear. It was so evident that once he got to the Northern Trust, 31st at the Barbasol, 16th at the 3M, 6th at the Barracuda, 2nd at the Wyndham, and then a miscut at the Northern Trust. And you just know there's fatigue. He made it to the finish line. But what I like about what he's done this year, he had a really nice week last week with a tied 14th. And he's a player that I think is turning into a mainstay out on the PGA Tour. So I look for him to continue the good start to the year and play really well out here. And then, Sia mentioned a couple of really nice names that I like. I clicked Adam Hadwin. I still feel like he's going to pop at some point, but at this point, I thought he played well last week. I look, it's like tied 41st. It's just not notable. He plays well in the desert, but does he really? I struggle with that. What are we going to get out of a Denny McCarthy, who played well last week, had himself in the mix, is a great putter, as we know. Denny McCarthy is a guy that has my interest. And going down the list, you start to take a couple of flyers here. I'm not into the Snedeker Kuchar gang.
No.
I just don't see it with them. I think you're looking down here for some younger players, some rising stars. Hank Lebioda, I go all day with Sia. I think he's got another week of me really backing him. I'll give him another week. I wasn't impressed at the Fortinet, but this could be a really nice venue for him because he's such a strong iron player. So I think those are my biggest leans. Maybe down at 6,200, a Wyndham Clark could pop, but it's a total flyer. And for the, to save $200, you may as well go with Tyler McCumber at the min. He's my favorite min, no question. And you feel like he can get himself in the top 5 if he plays well. But you wonder if he could miss a cut too. But he is no doubt, I think, has the most upside in the min price. And I think he has more upside than most of the guys in the 61 and 62 range. But yeah, Wyndham Clark would be that other popper that I might like because he putts it so well.
Here's where I'm at in the $6,000 range. Harry Hall's at Summerlin all the time. Sung Yul No at Summerlin all the time. Mark Hubbard's kind of interesting. He's made 6 cuts on a row on the PGA Tour. He's missed a couple of cuts on the Corn Ferry, but he finished 16th at the Fortinet. I don't mind Hubbard. He can kind of get that hot putter. Lebioda, I'm probably like a 6 out of 10 on excitement. If 5 is kind of average, I think I could give him one more crack. And then also, I think most people are aware, Piercy plays out of Summerlin as well. He's had some good results here, 2 top 20s in his last 3 trips. He's got a couple of top 20s here recently, 11th at the Fortinet, 15th at the Wyndham. So that's probably where I'm going to allocate a lot of my resources. I'm not super thrilled about the $6,000 range.
I agree with you. I think Sloan's a really good play. And he's 69, right?
Yeah.
6,900. But yeah, beyond that, there's some real dart throws, and they're going to happen. It's just, can you pick the right one? That's the challenge when you get down here to these big 7, lower half of the 6K ranges. They're so big, and that there's going to be a large portion of them near the top. Can you pick the right ones?
And you pick the right ones.
Speaking of dart throws, Scott Piercy, first round leader. I don't know what that number is. It's probably super high, which I love. So I'm going to play that. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, it's probably not out yet. Let me check. I'll check while I'm doing that. If you saw Nick Watney's name near the top of the leaderboard last week, I would not get too excited. He gained 11.5 strokes putting. His best week ever, one of the best weeks of anyone in the last couple of years. I'm going to say that does not happen again, so don't get too super excited. But anything else, yeah, I don't see first round leader bets yet. But that would be nice. We'll keep an eye out on Scott Piercy to be first round leader. Gentlemen, anything else before we get out of here on the first leg of the Vegas swing?
I'm feeling good. I'm excited. That's all I got to say.
Somebody's got to say Vegas, baby. And I just did, so we're good.
There we go. Mission accomplished. I'll be out there. Hopefully, I think I'm going to try to get out there tomorrow. See how the course is playing. That's Tuesday for those listening. See how it's playing, and maybe I can get some inside info. Maybe I can get into Patrick Reed's brain a little bit and see how he's feeling post Ryder Cup.
Stir it up a little bit.
All right, I'll do my best. That'll do it. Let me thank producer Jacob. Does all the hard work behind the scenes. That right there, Sia Nejad. You can find him on Twitter at Sia Nejad. That's Greg DuCharme. You can find him on Twitter at The Real GFD, and you can find me at RickRunGood. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.